What's going on, everybody? So we're going to get into the show pretty quickly here, but before we do, as always, if you've tuned into the show before, you know the deal. You know why we're here. You know what we do. We are here to help athletes reach higher level versions of themselves in their sport and build the careers that they're after, build their dream careers. So how we do that is we speak to the issues outside of the sport itself. We speak to mindset issues. We speak to, approaches to training. We speak to mistakes that athletes commonly make, and we need to make sure that we are speaking to these things to help athletes hit these mistakes before they actually cause issues in their career so they can make the necessary changes and in turn start to make the changes they need in order to build the careers that they're actually after in their sport. So today we are going to talk about why you will never reach your full potential just by hard training alone. Now, I keep getting a notification on one of the streams. Okay, now we're good to go. So we're going to talk about why you will never reach your full potential no matter how hard you train based off of training alone. So let's get into the show now. We're going to get going in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the number one show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I'm your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we are going to talk about how you will never reach your full potential no matter how hard you train. Now, I know that's a pretty harsh thing for me to say. However, let's get into why. So this is a story as old as time. This is something I hear constantly. Athletes training super hard, they compete, they don't get the result they want. So what do? They come back to training and they say, okay, I've got to train twice as hard coming into my next one. So they get back to training, they start training twice as hard, they start going to the gym extra hours, doing all these extra things, and then still end up losing. So this is why hard work is not going to get you to its full potential on its own, to your full potential on its own. So if you truly want to reach your true potential in your athletic career, make sure that you listen to what I have to say here. Doubling your training load to try to get better results in the sport is like trying to put 100 ounces of water into a bottle that only holds 50. The answer is not just more training. The answer is not just doing more. The answer is finding the right amount and doing it to the best of your ability. The key is not who trains the most, it's who makes better use of the time that they're training, mixed with who can recover better, who has a better mindset, and so much more than just that. So this is why training hard on its own will not get you to your full potential. I want to read a quote from former UFC welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. Used to be the number one pound for pound MMA fighter in the world. And he said in a post-fight interview, the reason that I'm the best in the world is because my mind is stronger than everyone in the division. And this is what you're overlooking. So many of you train so hard, don't get the result you want, and think, I just need to train harder. I just need to do more. I just need to hit more pads, spar more rounds, do more. When the answer isn't in how much training you're doing. The answer is in your mindset. The answer is in all of these areas outside of the gym that you're not paying attention to. The answer is not more hours in the gym. It's not more hours pounding the pavement, going for runs. The answer is spending time bulletproofing your mindset to be able to make better use of the time that you're training and in turn be able to succeed more in the sport. So where does mindset get in the way? Where do these struggles happen? One of the main things I see mindset get in the way for with athletes is allowing the opinions of other people to get in your head. At higher levels, this is people listening too much to the media. This is people listening to other athletes, fans, and trolls, and letting that affect the way you train. If you are coming into a fight and your opponent is talking a bunch of shit and you're spending your time focused on the things that your opponent is saying about you or the things that your opponent is saying to you, you're going to struggle because that is all time that should be focused on what you need to do to make sure you win when you step into the ring of the cage. If you're listening to, that latest article or that latest interview that came out that somebody said, oh, this athlete is soft or, oh, he doesn't have what it takes to win or any kind of things that you're not going to like to hear, if you're spending your time focused on that or worrying about that or being pissed off about that, again, this is all time that needs to be spent on you focusing on being the best version of you come the night of the fight, that you're putting energy into other things. Another huge thing that I see get in the way of a lot of athletes is letting ego guide their training. And one of the most common ways I see this is anytime an athlete tells me, I need to do more so that I've done more than my opponent. Now, I know me coming out against that phrase is going to be tough for a lot of people to hear, or weird for a lot of people to hear, because it's a phrase we hear so commonly. You need to outwork your opponent so that it's easy on the night of the fight. But the thing is, guys, if your opponent is doing hours and hours and hours of the wrong shit, you don't need to do more hours than your opponent. Especially because your opponent is a different person than you. That means they train differently than you. They respond to training differently than you. So their preparation has no effect on what you need in order to succeed in your fight. What you need in order to succeed when you come into a fight is to be properly prepared for the duration of the fight to the best of your ability. If that means doing more hours than your opponent, great. If that means doing less hours than your opponent, great. The focus does not need to be on them. The focus needs to be on you doing what you need to do to the best of your ability. That means you being well conditioned, your skill set being sharp, your body feeling good. That's it. Regardless of what your opponent did, that's what you need going into the fight, nothing else. So, how do we make sure that we don't let that ego get in the way? We don't let that ego get in the way by making sure you are not paying attention to anything you cannot control. So you're not paying attention to what your opponent's doing because you can't control that, and it has no effect on how you prepare. You're not paying attention to the articles, the people on the news, the interviews, whatever else it might be, because you know in your heart, if you spend your time and effort of preparing in the right way, that is what's going to lead you to being successful when the fight comes around. That's it. Now, another area, and the final one I wanted to talk about when it comes to the troubles with mindset that I see with a lot of athletes, the final area I wanted to talk about is not putting yourself in bad spots in the training room and only focusing on what you're good at. This one I see constantly. People telling me that, I don't have time to lift weights because, I need to do extra sparring, or I need to, hit more pads, or I need to roll more, or I need to do this. Guys, if you've been rolling for the last 15 years of your life and you've been doing jiu-jitsu, you've been doing super well at it, you've been improving, but you're fucking weak as shit, you're not going to lose that fight because your jiu-jitsu skills aren't up to par. You're going to lose that fight because you're going to get fucking ragdolled because you're weak as shit. But if you're not willing to sacrifice some of the time you're spending on the things you're good at to start focusing on the things you're weak at, that is where you're going to end up losing out. Because if you're not willing to sacrifice time focused on the things you're good at to focus more on bulletproofing your weaknesses, then over time, your opponents are going to start to understand where your weaknesses are. Your opponents are going to start to understand that you are weak when it comes to your overall strength and power. So they don't have to respect your punches because you don't have anything behind them. So they can walk through, eat one or two punches, take you down to the ground, and ragdoll you. They're going to start to understand what you don't do well, and they're going to start to exploit it. Unless you start putting your ego aside and understanding that you don't train to look good, you train to perform at the best of your abilities, and start to spend the right amount of time actually focused on bulletproofing your weaknesses, and in turn, allowing yourself to see more success in the sport. So how do we stop this? How do we stop the ego from getting in the way? How do we stop the mindset troubles from getting in the way? The first thing that I want you guys to do, and the first thing I want you guys to understand from this, is recommit to your ultimate goal. Why are you here? Are you here to win belts? Are you here to make more money? Are you here just for, the legacy and your family's future? What are you here for? Why are you training? Because when you have a clear picture of why you're training, now you can create the identity of the person you need to be in order to achieve those goals. You can create the identity of the person you need to be in order to achieve those goals. So, from the person you are right now, the person who gets upset every time somebody, talks about them in the media, from the person who always focuses on trying to figure out exactly what their opponent's doing so they can do more, from the person who doesn't spend time working on their weaknesses because they're too focused on trying to do the things they're good at and look good while they're training. How do we go from that person to the person who can focus solely on themselves, the person who can focus on doing the right things to properly prepare themselves? The thing is, you need to work on your mindset every fucking day. Every day, you need to have things you're doing to actually start improving your mindset. The same way as you need to progressively overload in the gym to get stronger, the same way as you need to practice your skills to improve them. You need to spend time developing your mindset. So one of the main ways that I do this, and one of the main ways that I focus on doing this with my athletes, is positive affirmations. And this can be simple things based around whatever it is you're struggling with right now. So as an example, one of the things we talked about in the episode is focusing on what your opponent is doing. So one of those affirmations, when you sit down and write them every morning, can be as simple as, I focus on what I can control and nothing else. And by just reaffirming that in your mind day after day after day, you're not going to feel the result right away. But over time, you're going to start realizing every time you go scroll Instagram to try to figure out what your opponent's up to, you're going to sit back, you're going to say, I focus on things I can control and nothing else. And you're going to be able to start reframing your mind and realizing that focusing on what your opponent is doing isn't helping you. Focusing on what your opponent is doing is just going to give you anxiety and just throw your training off more than it's actually going to help it. And in turn, you're going to be able to refocus on the things that matter. But if you're not spending time actually developing this in your mind, you're going to keep focusing on the wrong shit and in turn continue to fuck with the results you're getting when you step into the ring of the cage. So other affirmations, again, when it comes to, we talked about in the episode, training to look good and train, not putting yourself in bad spots in the training room because you're worried about how it's going to look and you're just focusing on doing the things that you actually enjoy and not the things you need to spend time on. So one of those affirmations could be, I train to win, not to look good. And then every time you go to avoid that thing you need to be doing more of when you're training, you got to repeat to yourself, I train to win, I don't train to look good. I train to win, I don't train to look good. I train to win, I don't train to look good. And as you continue to repeat that to yourself, then you start reaffirming in your mind that you are the person who trains to win and doesn't just train to look good. And in turn, you are the person who is going to do whatever it takes to succeed and not the person who's just going to slack off and do the shit they enjoy and avoid the stuff that they don't want to do. Does this help? Does this make sense? Because again, just like training your skills, just like training your physicality, just like training any other area, if you are not spending active time training your mind, it is not going to get better. It is not going to get stronger. It is not going to get more bulletproof. And that might be fine for where you're at right now. You might be sitting here listening to this saying, well, it doesn't matter. I'm doing fine. I don't have any mindset struggles. Yeah, you don't right now. But what about at the next level when you're fighting in front of thousands of people? Or the level after that when you're fighting on a pay-per-view card? Or the level after that when you're starting to make $20, $30, $40, $50,000 every time you fight? Is your mind still going to hold up the same way? Is it still going to be easy to step in there? Is it still going to be easy when you got more eyes on you? Are you still going to be able to focus the same way 5, 10, 15 years down the road? Because if not, you need to start focusing on this shit now. Because if you're not focusing on this stuff now, if you're not starting to work on this stuff today, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. But we want to make sure we're preventing those problems from coming up before they ever come up. So start with something simple. Every day in the morning, my best advice would be to start with 3 affirmations. So pick 3 areas where your mind gets in your way and start affirming the person that you are trying to become like you are already there. I focus on things I can control and nothing else. I train to win, not to look good. Little things like that just help reinforce in your mind the person you need to become in order to achieve the levels that you want to achieve. You got this shit. Simple tasks every single day. That's the way we're going to get there. So that is it. That is all. I hope you guys got something good out of this one. If you got some value, I'd love to know what it was. So if you're here right now, drop a comment. If you are tuning into this on the podcast, on the YouTube channel, anywhere else that you can find this show, make sure to drop a comment here or send me a message on any of my social media accounts so you can tell me what you learned and what you can implement right away. So as always, as we wrap up the show, my one ask of you is that you share this show with a friend, with a teammate, the coach, with someone who's going to need to hear this message, someone that's going to benefit from it. I appreciate you all for tuning in. I appreciate you all for taking the time. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk again soon.